Aodhan Ó Riodáin, Deputy, 6 minutes.
Thanks, Les Concordia, and thanks to the Minister for the contribution. And in keeping with the previous speaker's tone, I suppose it would be easier to explode into this chamber and give a list of previous cuts done under previous administrations, but that's not fair to the topic at hand and to the people who will be affected by this change. I suppose anybody who witnessed the Minister's contribution a couple of weeks ago when he addressed some students in the gallery, to me it was one of the most inspirational things I've seen in my short time here, because I suppose what's happening in education, many of the things are incredibly exciting. We talk about junior cert reform, leaving cert reform, tackling the dreaded point system, talking about vested interests like the bodies that are patrons of our schools, talking about admission policies, and of course tackling the issue of literacy and numeracy, and the fact that we are slipping down the tables, as the Minister has rightly said. So the Minister, in a very short time in the department, has tackled a huge number of issues which are fundamental to how our education system is structured. And so it is absolutely impossible to make any cut in education without hurting the education system, without affecting the quality of some of the education provision. I think nobody in this chamber would deny that. And nobody in this chamber would deny that when you make a 3.8 billion change or correction in the budget, that education can be ring-fenced. I wish that was the case, but it is not the case. And I did spend some time yesterday in 4 of my local schools, and I spoke to one particularly impressive student counsel in Manor House who spoke about many of the issues that I've just described about junior cert reform, leaving cert reform, their hopes, their dreams, what lies ahead of them. And they did speak about the guidance counsellor provision in their own school and how important it is to them. Because it's not easy to be a child in modern day Ireland. It's not easy to be a child or a young person looking at leaving cert or looking at university life ahead of them in the current circumstance. And of course it's not your fault if you happen to be 16 or 17 in secondary school in the middle of a recession and in the middle of budgetary corrections. And they did speak about, and some of the guidance counsellors in different schools I went to spoke about the impact that this recession is having on their students. The fact that they do hear the discussions that are being held in kitchens and in bedrooms in their houses. They're aware of the financial pressures. They know that their parents have lost jobs. They hear about people in their own classrooms doing stupid things, getting involved in behaviour that maybe they shouldn't. And that guiding hand is important. And I know the Minister knows this, that if we take the goodwill out of schools, and we take the sense of vocation out of schools, then we lose pretty much everything. And the guidance counsellor position is an extremely important one. But having said that, what it would have been easier to do, as has been done previously, would be to increase the pupil-teacher ratio in the secondary schools. And the guidance counsellor would then have less things to guide the students with, because they'd have less subjects to study. And that is one of the choices that the Minister and the Government was unfortunately faced with. But if you look at some of the things that we actually do spend money on in the education system, and I think it's a great opportunity for this Government and this Parliament, seeing as the Minister has been so open about some of the challenges in education, because it would be easy to say that we have the best education system in the world when the PISA results say otherwise. It would be easy to say that we're the land of saints and scholars when some of our results don't stack up. So I think it's when we have an open book on the education system and what we spend money on. I mean, for me, spending 178 million on school rural transport doesn't make any sense.
2 minutes remaining.
Yeah, but I have obviously an urban bias, and I know the Minister doesn't agree with me on that particular point about school rural transport, that the 178 million is justifiable. But I think, many of us might say that it's a lot of money. But there's another aspect to the budget which comes in under the guidance area, if you like, which is the money that we spend on chaplains in schools. Now, this is a more difficult one to unpick because it's contained in the deeds of trust of many of our community schools. And I'm given to understand, and this figure may be incorrect, and if it is, I apologise, but in around the 9 million mark. Now, I think we really have to unpick some of the some of the aspects of our education budget that just don't stand up to scrutiny. Because, as the previous speaker has quite rightly said, we are talking about children. We're talking about children and students and young people who are going through a difficult time, who are our future, who depend absolutely on us and on their schools, and on teachers who, and of course, like all public servants, have been incredibly vilified over the past number of years, have had 14% of their pay cut taken off them by previous administrations, who understand that quite clearly when I talk to them, as to why their pay packets are smaller and why their days are longer. But I know, as the Minister knows, and this government understands, that it has to be fully focused on the child and the capacity of the child to reach their educational potential. Because education is a liberator. And if you have nothing else, if you have a family that falls apart, if you have a dysfunctional community, you have things around in your area that aren't working, the only thing that will ever work is education and the school that you have the chance in which to thrive. So I accept the counter motion put down by the government. I absolutely accept the Minister's bona fides in this area. I do agree with the previous speaker, Deputy O'Donnell, that we have to look at some of the things we're spending money on. And I have to absolutely justify them in order to ensure that measures like this can hopefully in the future potentially be overturned and maybe lessened. Because if we're spending 9 million on chaplains, I'm not sure if anybody in this House will justify that expenditure. So I commend the Minister on what he is doing to education. This is probably the most exciting time in education in a generation, when everything is up for grabs, when everything is being challenged, when everything is being refocused upon, when we are getting down to what really matters, literacy, numeracy, making a junior cert that works, a leaving cert that works, challenging the vested interests in terms of the patronage, and looking at admission policies so that no child is turned away from any door of any school for reasons which aren't in.
I'll have to ask the Deputy to conclude his remarks, please.
Okay, so I
thank you, Deputy. I call